Pentagon's most classified file contained just one number, 127. That was Amanda Brooks' confirmed kill count. But here's what made it terrifying. Nobody in the military knew who she was, because by day, she was teaching third graders how to solve word problems. And by night, she was solving much deadlier problems. Room 12B at Lincoln Elementary School in Virginia looked exactly like any other third-grade classroom. Colorful posters covered the walls, tiny desks arranged in neat rows, and a whiteboard filled with math problems. Standing at the front of this ordinary room was Amanda Brooks, a woman who appeared to be the most unremarkable teacher you could imagine. She was 34 years old, stood about 5'6", with shoulder-length brown hair that she always kept in a simple ponytail. She wore cardigans, comfortable flats, and reading glasses that constantly slipped down her nose. Her students thought she was nice, but boring. Their parents considered her competent, but forgettable. Which sniper rifle do you like? Please mention it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. But what none of them knew was that Amanda Brooks was living the most dangerous double life in American history. Every morning at 7:45 a.m., she would unlock her classroom door with the same key she'd used for 8 years. She would write the day's math lesson on the whiteboard, arrange papers on her desk, and prepare for another day of teaching addition and subtraction to 8-year-olds. But hidden in her basement, underneath a false floor that looked like ordinary concrete, was equipment that would make Navy SEALs jealous. The first sign that something was different about Amanda Brooks came during a school lockdown drill. It was October 15, 2018, and Lincoln Elementary was practicing their safety procedures when something went wrong. A real threat had been called into the school district. Police surrounded the building. Teachers were instructed to keep their students calm and quiet while law enforcement searched the premises. While other teachers were visibly shaken, pacing nervously and checking their phones, Amanda Brooks remained perfectly still. She sat at her desk with an expression that her students had never seen before. Her eyes weren't scanning the room in panic like the other adults. Instead, she was listening to footsteps in the hallway, counting the number of officers, calculating their positions based on radio chatter that was barely audible through the walls. One of her students, 8-year-old Tyler, would later tell his parents something strange. He said that during the lockdown, Mrs. Brooks had whispered something under her breath. When Tyler asked her to repeat it, she claimed she hadn't said anything. But Tyler was certain he had heard her correctly. She had whispered, "2 tangos, northeast corridor, probably armed," military terminology. In a third-grade classroom. To understand how Amanda Brooks became the most lethal teacher in America, we need to go back 15 years. Before she ever set foot in a classroom, Amanda Brooks was Sergeant Amanda Brooks of the United States Army. She had enlisted at 19, driven by a desire to serve her country and escape a difficult family situation in rural Montana. What her recruiters discovered was that Amanda had a gift so rare that it occurs in less than 1% of the population. Perfect hand-eye coordination, inhuman focus, and most importantly, the ability to remain completely calm under pressure. During basic training, Amanda's shooting scores were so high that her instructors thought there had been a mistake. She could hit targets at distances that seasoned marksmen struggled with. But more impressive than her accuracy was her consistency. She never missed. Not one. Within 6 months, Amanda was recruited into a special operations unit that officially didn't exist. Her military records showed that she served as a supply clerk for 4 years. The reality was far different. Amanda Brooks became one of America's most valuable assets in the War on Terror. Operating under deep cover, she eliminated high-value targets across 3 continents. Her longest confirmed kill was 2080 mortared 47 meters, nearly 2 miles away. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. After 4 years of active duty, Amanda Brooks made a decision that shocked her commanding officers. She wanted out. In 2011, Amanda Brooks submitted her discharge papers. She told her superiors that she was done with war, done with killing, done with living in shadows. She wanted a normal life. The military tried everything to keep her. They offered promotions, better assignments, more money, but Amanda had made up her mind. She was going to become a teacher. Her commanding officer, Colonel James Morrison, would later say that losing Amanda Brooks was like losing an entire battalion. But he also understood something that others didn't. Amanda wasn't really leaving the military behind. She was just changing her mission. Amanda enrolled in a teaching program at Virginia Commonwealth University. She excelled in her studies, just as she had excelled in everything else. Her professors described her as dedicated, patient, and surprisingly good with children. In 2013, she was hired at Lincoln Elementary School. For the first time in years, Amanda Brooks felt like she could breathe. She had a normal job, a normal life, and most importantly, she wasn't taking lives anymore, she was shaping them. But the military wasn't ready to let their best asset go completely. 6 months into her teaching career, Amanda received a visit that would change everything. Colonel Morrison appeared at her apartment on a Friday evening in March. He didn't come alone. The men with him weren't wearing uniforms, but Amanda recognized the type immediately. CIA. Defense Intelligence Agency. Maybe something even more classified. They had a proposition for her. Not a return to active duty, but something different. Something that would allow her to keep her teaching job while still serving her country. The United States had a problem. High-value targets who couldn't be eliminated through conventional military operations, war criminals hiding in American suburbs, international terrorists who had disappeared into civilian populations. They needed someone who could operate with absolute discretion. Someone who lived a perfectly normal life but could become lethal when necessary. Someone like Amanda Brooks. The arrangement was simple. She would continue teaching. Her weekdays belonged to her students, but her weekends belonged to America. Amanda's initial instinct was to refuse. She had left that life behind, but then they showed her the files, photographs of the men they were tracking. Men responsible for bombing schools, kidnapping children, executing innocent families. One photograph stopped her cold. Dmitry Volkov, a former Russian intelligence officer turned arms dealer, he had been supplying weapons to terrorist groups targeting American schools overseas. Amanda stared at the photograph for a long moment. Then she looked up at Colonel Morrison and said 4 words that would define the next decade of her life. When do I start? Amanda Brooks' first weekend mission took place on November 8, 2014. The target was Marcus Webb, a former military contractor who had been selling classified information to foreign governments. Webb had disappeared into civilian life, living under an assumed name in a cabin near Shenandoah National Park. On Friday afternoon, Amanda told her students she was going camping for the weekend. It wasn't entirely a lie. She drove to a location 40 miles from Webb's cabin and set up what appeared to be an ordinary camping site. She pitched a tent, built a campfire, and even roasted marshmallows. But as darkness fell, Amanda Brooks, the elementary school teacher, disappeared. In her place was someone else entirely. Amanda had spent weeks studying satellite imagery of Webb's property. She knew his routines, his habits, his vulnerabilities. Webb took his dog for a walk every morning at exactly 6:15 a.m. He would walk to the edge of his property, approximately 800 meters from the main road. Amanda positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the walking path. At 6:14 a.m., she could see Webb's cabin door through her scope. At 6:15, the door opened. Marcus Webb stepped outside with his German Shepherd, just as he had every morning for the past 6 months. He walked down the same path, paused at the same tree, threw a stick for his dog. At 6:17 a.m., from a distance of 84 to 7 meters, Amanda Brooks squeezed the trigger. One shot. Clean. Instantaneous. The official cause of death was listed as a hunting accident. A tragic case of mistaken identity during deer season. By 6:30 a.m., Amanda was back at her campsite, making coffee and planning her drive home. By Monday morning, she was back in classroom 12B, teaching her students about fractions. Over the next 5 years, Amanda Brooks developed a pattern that was both brilliant and terrifying in its simplicity. Every Friday afternoon, she would tell her students about her weekend plans. Sometimes she was going camping, sometimes visiting family, sometimes taking photography classes in the mountains. Her fellow teachers at Lincoln Elementary saw her as someone who loved the outdoors. They admired her adventurous spirit and her apparent fearlessness when it came to solo camping trips. What they didn't know was that Amanda's camping trips had a body count. Her targets were always men who had evaded justice through conventional means, war criminals who had disappeared into witness protection, terrorist financiers hiding behind legitimate businesses, arms dealers operating under assumed identities. Each mission was meticulously planned. Amanda would spend weeks, sometimes months, studying her target. She learned their routines, their habits, their weaknesses. She identified the perfect location for elimination, always somewhere remote, always at a distance that made her presence undetectable. Her weapon of choice was a custom-built rifle that she kept disassembled and hidden in her basement. The rifle could be broken down into components small enough to fit in an ordinary hiking backpack. When assembled, it was capable of precision accuracy at distances exceeding 2 miles. But Amanda's greatest weapon wasn't her rifle. It was her patience. She never rushed, never took unnecessary risks. If conditions weren't perfect, she would abort the mission and wait for another opportunity. This discipline made her invisible to law enforcement and intelligence agencies around the world. Between 2014 and 2019, 47 high-value targets died in what appeared to be unrelated accidents across the eastern United States. Hunting accidents, equipment failures during extreme sports, tragic mishaps during solo hiking trips. What connected these deaths was invisible to everyone, except a small group of military officials who knew the truth. Each victim had been on America's most wanted list. Each death occurred on a weekend, and each elimination was carried out with surgical precision from impossible distances. Amanda's perfect record almost came to an end in September 2019. Her target was Viktor Petrov, a former Soviet weapons scientist who had been selling nuclear materials to terrorist organizations. Petrov was living under deep cover in rural Pennsylvania, operating a small antique shop. The mission should have been routine. Amanda had studied Petrov for 3 months. She knew that every Saturday morning he would drive to a secluded lake to go fishing. The location was perfect, isolated, with clear sight lines, no witnesses. Amanda positioned herself on a hillside 1,200 meters from the lake. At 7:30 a.m., Petrov's car appeared on the access road. At 7:35, he parked and began unloading his fishing equipment. But something was different. Petrov wasn't alone. A second car had followed him to the lake. 2 men emerged, both carrying concealed weapons. Amanda recognized them immediately from her briefing materials. Petrov's bodyguards, who were supposed to be in New York that weekend. Amanda had 2 choices: abort the mission or take all 3 targets. Through her scope, she watched as Petrov set up his fishing chair on the far side of the lake. The bodyguards took positions approximately 50 meters away, trying to look casual but clearly providing security. Amanda calculated angles, wind speed, and distance. 3 targets, 3 shots. Maximum time between first and last shot, 12 seconds. At 7:47 a.m., Amanda squeezed the trigger. The first shot eliminated Petrov instantly. The bodyguards had less than 4 seconds to react before they realized they were under attack. They began scanning the surrounding hills, searching for the source of the shot. They never found it. Amanda's second and third shots came within 6 seconds of each other. Both bodyguards dropped before they could identify her position or return fire. 3 shots, 3 kills, maximum distance, 1,200. By 8:00 a.m., Amanda was hiking back to her car. By 8:30, she was driving home. By Monday morning, she was teaching her 3rd graders about multiplication tables. The official investigation concluded that Petrov and his associates had been killed by a rival criminal organization. No evidence was found linking the deaths to any government operation. For 6 years, Amanda Brooks lived this double life flawlessly. To her students, she was the nice teacher who brought homemade cookies to class and stayed late to help with math problems. To her colleagues, she was the quiet outdoors enthusiast who spent her weekends hiking and camping. But to a small group of military officials, she was America's most valuable covert asset. The number in that classified Pentagon file, 27 confirmed kills, represented more than just a body count. It represented the elimination of threats that conventional military operations couldn't touch. War criminals who would have otherwise lived free, terrorists who would have continued planning attacks, arms dealers who would have kept supplying weapons to America's enemies. Amanda Brooks had prevented more terrorist attacks than most people realized. She had disrupted arms-dealing networks that spanned 3 continents. She had eliminated threats that could have resulted in thousands of American deaths, all while maintaining her cover as an elementary school teacher. But in December 2019, Amanda's world began to unravel. It started with a simple question from one of her students. 8-year-old Sarah Kim had been absent from school on Monday, and when she returned on Tuesday, she asked Mrs. Brooks about her weekend. "Did you have a good camping trip, Mrs. Brooks?" Amanda replied that she had, just as she always did. But then Sarah said something that made Amanda's blood run cold. "My dad says he saw you at the gas station in Fredericksburg on Sunday morning, but you said you were camping in West Virginia." It was a small mistake. Amanda had stopped for gas on her way home from a mission, still wearing her hiking clothes, still maintaining her camping cover story. She hadn't noticed Sarah's father at the adjacent pump, but Sarah Kim's father was a retired police detective. He had sharp eyes and an excellent memory for details. Detective Mike Kim had spent 25 years solving cases that others couldn't crack. When his daughter mentioned seeing her teacher 200 miles from where she claimed to be camping, something didn't sit right. It wasn't suspicion of anything criminal. Mike just had the cop instinct that notices inconsistencies. Over the next few weeks, Mike began paying closer attention to Amanda Brooks's weekend activities. Not stalking or investigating officially, just noticing details. Amanda said she was visiting family in North Carolina one weekend. Mike happened to be at the hardware store on Saturday morning and saw her purchasing camping supplies. Amanda mentioned taking a photography class in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Mike's neighbor, who worked for the Park Service, said he hadn't seen any photography workshops scheduled that weekend. Small inconsistencies. Nothing criminal, but enough to make a retired detective curious. Mike decided to do something that would change everything. He asked his daughter to invite Mrs. Brooks to their family barbecue. Amanda couldn't refuse without seeming rude. So on a Saturday afternoon in February 2020, she found herself in Mike Kim's backyard, making small talk with a man who was unknowingly investigating her. The conversation was casual at first. Mike asked about her camping trips, her photography hobby, her favorite hiking trails. Amanda answered carefully, maintaining her cover story. But then Mike mentioned something that made Amanda's heart skip a beat. "You know, Amanda, I used to be in the military myself. Army, did some time in Afghanistan. There's something about you that reminds me of the operators I worked with over there." Amanda forced a laugh. "I think you're giving me too much credit, Mike. I'm just a teacher who likes the outdoors." But Mike wasn't finished. "It's something in your eyes, you know? The way you scan a room when you enter. The way you position yourself with your back to the wall. Small things, habits that military people develop." Amanda realized that her cover was beginning to crack. Not because she had made any major mistakes, but because a trained observer had started noticing the tiny details that revealed her true nature. That night, Amanda sat in her basement, staring at the components of her disassembled rifle. For the first time in 6 years, she wondered if it was time to end this double life. She had eliminated 127 high-value targets without ever being detected by law enforcement or intelligence agencies. But she was being undone by the curiosity of a retired cop whose daughter happened to be in her class. Amanda had 3 options. She could eliminate Mike Kim, but that would mean killing an innocent man and traumatizing her student. She could disappear, abandoning her teaching career and going underground. Or she could end her covert operations and become nothing more than what she appeared to be, an elementary school teacher. The decision should have been simple. Amanda had always known this day might come. She had prepared for it, mentally and logistically. But as she sat in her basement, Amanda realized something that surprised her. She didn't want to give up teaching. Over the past 6 years, her students had become more than just a cover story. They had become the most important part of her life. She thought about Tyler, who had struggled with math until Amanda spent extra time helping him understand fractions. She thought about Sarah Kim, whose curious questions had started this whole situation. She thought about the dozens of children who had passed through her classroom, each one learning something that would help them in life. Amanda Brooks made a decision that would have shocked her military handlers. She chose her students over her missions. On March 15, 2020, Amanda Brooks sent a coded message to her military contact. The message was simple: the teacher is retiring. Colonel Morrison tried to change her mind. The Pentagon offered her more money, better support, even a new identity in a different city. But Amanda's decision was final. She had spent 6 years eliminating America's enemies. Now she wanted to spend the rest of her career building America's future. Amanda destroyed her rifle, eliminated all traces of her covert activities, and became exactly what she appeared to be, an elementary school teacher who enjoyed camping on weekends. Mike Kim never learned the truth about his daughter's teacher. His curiosity eventually faded, replaced by other concerns when the COVID-19 pandemic began just weeks after Amanda's retirement. But sometimes, late at night, Mike would wonder about Amanda Brooks. There had been something about her that he couldn't quite identify, something that suggested she was more than she appeared to be. He was right, of course, but some secrets are meant to stay buried. Today, Amanda Brooks is still teaching third grade at Lincoln Elementary School. Her students think she's a little boring but very kind. Her colleagues consider her dependable but unremarkable. What none of them know is that their ordinary math teacher was once the most lethal woman in America. A woman who could eliminate targets from distances exceeding 2 miles. A woman who never missed. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Amanda Brooks isn't her kill count or her perfect accuracy. It's the fact that she chose to leave that life behind for something more meaningful. She chose to shape young minds instead of ending dangerous lives. She chose to teach children how to solve math problems instead of solving the world's deadliest problems. And maybe in the end, that makes her the most extraordinary teacher of all.